Hey guys, Chris here. I'm a Ukrainian Canadian. Today is June 13th, 2024. And let's get to the news happening in Ukraine, shall we? And I want to start today with a big announcement by the US and the Biden administration, and that is widening its sanctions on Russia in the banking sector. You can see that the Biden administration has confirmed that they're going to target more foreign banks that are deemed to be aiding Russia's war effort in Ukraine. They've also placed sanctions on the Moscow Stock Exchange, leading to it halting trading in dollars and euros. And you saw massive lineups in St. Petersburg, in Moscow, of Russians trying to trade their rubles into dollars or euros. And it's also moved to try to restrict Russia's use of technology, including chips and software, because we know that Russia is still able to circumvent the sanctions, especially in the technological sphere, by creating shell companies and purchasing through different countries. Now, what is important here is that it's the beginning of a slow economic collapse of Russia. I think that China is still stepping in. It's obviously going to continue stepping in and helping and assisting Russia to continue to fight against or continue its war effort in Ukraine. And so as long as China is there, I don't think you're going to allow for the collapse of Russia. So that's why I'm mentioning slow collapse. And we know that essentially still certain things are going to be difficult to really fully crack down, especially when we're talking about China. The components that the Chinese are trading with Russia, such as chips and other components that are necessary to build missiles, build tanks, build jet fighters in Russia. So China is still interested in continuing to assist and help Russia. So I think that this is only the beginning of a slow collapse, because essentially, apart from China, there's no other country that can keep Russia afloat. But Russia can keep afloat for a pretty long time. And I think that most likely we're really going to start feeling the effects by the end of this decade. And the Russians will truly be suffering. And that's good news because they have to pay price. The Russians did not protest against Putin the way that we thought they would. The Russians, as a matter of fact, are okay with the war. And so then they need to feel the sanctions, and they also need to feel this war economically. So I think that's a really big step up by the United States. And finally, we're seeing that there is more pressure. There's more. The stakes are being raised by the West, especially the United States, which is good news. And as a matter of fact, another thing I need to add here, even if Russia was to win tomorrow, there's absolutely no way that Russia could recover from this economic collapse. There's absolutely no way that the West is going to reinvest its capital into Russia. Even if Russia was to win tomorrow, maybe a few companies here and there, I'm not surprised if that would happen. But no way big companies and foreign capital is going to think, yeah, Russia, it's a great investment opportunity. No way. And I think that the economic collapse might be even worse than what we saw in the 90s after the collapse of the Soviet Union in Russia. So I think that's going to be really bad. And by the turn of the other decade, in the 2030s, it's possible that Russia might fully collapse. That's my opinion. You guys can let me know in the comment section. What do you think? But this is overall great news and a big step up by the United States against Russia. But China is still going to step in and keep Russia afloat. Now, another big announcement is the G7, and they agreed on giving US $1 billion for Ukraine at the expense of Russian assets. So this has been agreed upon. It's been announced by the Italian Prime Minister, Giorgia Meloni. And essentially, we're seeing that Russia is finally starting to pay price for the war through its own frozen assets. And who's going to pay for that is the Russian oligarchs, the Russian elites that have been stashing away all that money, all that sweet cash in Europe, in the United States, Canada, Australia, and other countries. So this is really good news because this could lead to a potential mutiny within the elites of the Kremlin against the Putin regime. This is entirely possible. I have very little faith in the Russians actually rising against Putin. We've seen the extent of their protests in the last 2.5 years. So I think that really, if there was something such as a coup against Putin, it could only be made by the elites. And this is obviously going to give a precedent for more frozen assets being used to fund Ukraine's stability, its economy, and its defense especially when it comes down to the Russia-Ukraine war. And at the very least, the budget for Ukraine is secured for this year and also, I believe, next year. So for 2024, 2025, Ukraine has secured $60 billion from the United States in financial and military assistance, and also from Europe, the G7 mostly, in the $50 billion of frozen Russian assets. So this is a massive, massive big deal. And again, we're seeing, as I've mentioned previously, that the West is increasing the sanctions and the pressure on Russia to more effective levels after 2.5 years of war. It's better late than ever. We wish this would have happened earlier, but we're seeing that the West is more decisive, and that's great news. And the West, again, is ready to raise the stakes against Russia. And last but not least, additionally, some more good news. Japan signed a security agreement with Ukraine and also the United States. So this is just breaking news. The United States has also confirmed a security agreement deal with Ukraine that is of 10 years. It's not NATO, but this is another big step up, right? We know that, unfortunately, with the way I'm seeing things, the West is just slowly giving something to Ukraine, a little bit, and seeing where it goes. And this is the same thing here. Japan gave a little bit, the United States gave a little bit, but this is still a step forward. And again, Japan has a lot of experience in recovery post-war, and Japan is one of the top economic countries and nations in the world, so they have a lot to provide, a lot of value to provide for Ukraine. You can see that this includes security, defense assistance, humanitarian aid, technical and financial cooperation, as well as joint efforts on the peace formula. We know that the peace summit will happen in the next few days in Switzerland, and it's really a big message as well against Russia that the West is backing Ukraine, that this is not going to be another Minsk I or Minsk II agreement. It's going to be, we're backing Ukraine's victory with its own nuances, its own limitations. The definition of victory is different, whether it be for the Ukrainians or the Americans or French. So we have to see. This is only the beginning of the process in Switzerland. It's not like they're going to come out with a peace agreement, by the end of next week. But the most important thing is that we're starting the conversation, and I'm seeing that now the West understands that Ukraine cannot get the short end of the stick. Whether it be on the peace deals or any agreements that Ukraine signs with Russia, they cannot be a loser like they were in Minsk I and Minsk II, because otherwise Russia's going to use that time to rearm and attack Ukraine or other nations in Europe. Let's not forget the Baltics, let's not forget Poland, let's not forget Moldova, and other countries that could be attacked by Russia, or Russia could just essentially light up the powder keg, whether it be in the Balkans or other areas in Europe. Who knows, right? We've seen the pressure right now between the Belarusian and the Polish border, where Lukashenko and Putin are essentially throwing thousands of migrants at the border and trying to swarm them into Poland, right? That could be another way that Russia, well, obviously Russia is waging that type of war, so they could, multiply that by 10 through various schemes. So that's really important that Ukraine comes out victorious, or at least wins more than Russia in the peace summit. That's really important. And that's the video for today, guys. Really a huge thank you for support for this channel. If you enjoy my content, please subscribe. Leave me a comment about any of the topics I covered today. And I do read your comments. I love reading your inputs, your comments, your knowledge. So huge thank you again. And I will see you guys in the next one. Slava Ukraini!